Hey everyone, Israel is currently in a war against the terror organization Hamas, and we know how hard it can be to keep up with all the news. So if you haven't had the time to stay on top of the latest developments out of Israel, we're here for you. I'm Ladar Gavelazi, and this is ILTV's Weekly Review.
I'm here in Kfar Aza now, on the Gaza border, one of the communities which was hardest hit on the October 7th massacre. And what we see here are absolute scenes of destruction. There were about a little over 50 people who were murdered from this community alone, 17 who have been confirmed to have been kidnapped, and others who are still unaccounted for. Now, where we're standing right now is actually the area of the young adults, single people who lived here in these houses. The Hamas terrorists who entered actually went house to house, murdering them, in some cases kidnapping as well as rape. Really devastating scenes here. We see in some of the houses that grenades had been thrown. We see bullet holes in the doors where the terrorists had forced entry. Just devastating scenes from here in Kfar Aza. Now, right behind us, very close to the same neighborhood, we actually see behind us the fence to Gaza. Now, this is one of 3 entries that the Palestinian terrorists used when they came into this kibbutz on October 7th. If you look closely at the fence, you can see still that the fence is bent, that's destroyed. This is where hundreds of terrorists came through. The IDF estimates that a little over 3,000 terrorists came into southern Israel for the purpose of slaughtering, kidnapping, raping, torturing men, women, and children in southern Israel. We're going to take a look inside one of the houses a little bit closer. You can see here at the entrance the forced entry. This is the same thing that we've seen on a lot of the houses in this area, even bullet holes in the doors of the residences. And continuing just a few steps away, we see a house that was completely destroyed on the inside, burned, set on fire. In some cases, when the civilians locked themselves in the bomb shelters that were inside their homes, the terrorists tried to light the house on fire in order to force them out, in which case many of them were murdered or in some cases kidnapped. This is one of the houses which clearly was set on fire.
In a startling revelation last night, Israel's military spokesman, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, disclosed that a mosque in the Zaytun area was not only a religious site, but mainly served as a clandestine factory for producing weapons and UAVs. ILTV's Devo Klein has the details.
אנחנו לוחמי גדוד 890 של הצנחנים, ביחד עם כוחות הנדסה מיוחדים, נמצאים מתחת למסגד בלב העיר עזה. נמצאה פה מעבדה של רקטות מיוחדת של החמאס, שמראה איך החמאס משתמש במסגדים לרצח נשים וילדים.
הלוחמים מחטיבה 188 איתרו מעבדה לייצור אמצעי לחימה וכלי טייס בלתי מאוישים בתוך מסגד. אני רוצה שתבינו, מסגד במרחב זייתון משמש מעבדה לייצור לחימה. לוחמים נכנסים למסגד, מבצעים סריקה, אחרי שבדקנו שאין מלכודים, נכנסים לתוך המסגד הזה, מוצאים פיר, ביחד עם לוחמי יעלום, מוצאים פיר, בנוסף לפיר הזה ירידה ומדרגות, ושם מגלים סדנה לייצור רקטות.
These were Hagari's words last night as he provided details of the operation, explaining that troops entered the mosque, conducted scans to ensure safety, and then uncovered a hidden tunnel shaft and staircase within the premises. Hagari expressed strong condemnation, stating terrorists manufacturing rockets in a mosque, using Islam and the symbols of Islam to create terror. The Zaytun neighborhood, identified as a Hamas stronghold in the southern part of Gaza City, adds another layer of significance to this discovery. Hagari asserted that the IDF is committed to exposing Hamas's exploitation of civilian sites for terrorist activities and vowed to continue efforts to unveil such instances. This revelation raises concerns about the misuse of religious spaces for terror purposes and adds to the large amounts of ammunition found every day among Gazan civilian infrastructure.
What you can see is military equipment, full-scale military equipment. This is not something that was cooked in somebody's backyard. It is not something that 2 people came to talk about. This is years-long planning, a lot of funding. There is huge money.
And moving on, the IDF released a number of videos on Sunday offering resounding evidence that Hamas used the Al-Shifa hospital as a base for terror activities and even brought hostages to the hospital on October 7th. Additionally, the IDF released a video of a Hamas terror tunnel, a massive tunnel right under the hospital. Let's take a look.
The IDF has revealed long-awaited footage of a 55-meter-long terror tunnel running 10 meters deep under Shifa Hospital, finally providing proof of the existence of Hamas terror tunnels under the hospital. The entrance to the tunnel was uncovered in the area of the hospital underneath a shed, alongside a vehicle containing numerous weapons, including RPGs, explosives, and rifles. At the end of the tunnel were blast-proof doors. The IDF also released footage of security cameras it had obtained from Shifa Hospital, documenting how Hamas terrorists forcibly transported 2 hostages, a Nepalese civilian and a Thai civilian, through the hospital, offering proof of Hamas's use of Shifa on the day of the October 7th massacre. In addition to the release of these videos, IDF spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari said that Israel intelligence found that one of the hostages, Noah Marziano, whose body was recovered last week, was murdered inside Shifa and not by airstrikes, as Hamas claims. Hagari said Marziano had been wounded, but that a pathology report indicated she was dealt a deadly blow or deadly beaten by Hamas terrorists.
The world must remember, Hamas is holding the elderly, men, women, children, babies, hostage. The Israel Defense Forces has a moral obligation to bring every one of our hostages home. We will not rest until we do.
Well, last night we had the opportunity to sit down with Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus to discuss the state of the war after more than 40 days and what the IDF's objectives are in light of the truce developments. Let's take a look at what he had to say about the IDF's conduct, long-term strategy, and the pause in fighting. Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, thank you so much for joining us during this busy and difficult time. Let's start things off with a question about the main objective of this operation. Now that the IDF has effectively conquered northern Gaza, do they plan to continue into southern Gaza?
46 days to be exact, and we continue to operate and to dismantle Hamas. That is our aim. We have been making good, steady, methodical progress so far in northern Gaza. I think we've been engaged with and taken out of action between 11 to 12 of the 12 Hamas battalions in northern Gaza, which is good progress. Not all of them are out of commission yet, but their main fighting capabilities have been significantly affected by our activity, which is good, but there's still the other half, another 12 Hamas battalions that are in southern Gaza, central and southern Gaza. And of course, I think everybody understands that in order to prevent a second October 7th, and in order to prevent another terror attack from Gaza, we have to make sure that we take out all of Hamas capabilities, and that is what the IDF intends to do.
So if the IDF is continuing to hunt down Hamas terrorists in southern Gaza, what protections will be provided for Palestinian civilians, especially given the fact that nearly 1 million of them have fled from the north to the south?
Yeah, the human situation in southern Gaza is important. We need to make sure that we fight the enemy, Hamas, and not the civilian population. They aren't our enemy, and we will continue to take steps in order to keep them as much as possible, as much as feasible in this war that we find ourselves out of harm's way. We'll find solutions, whether it will be the humanitarian area in the Muassi or other solutions that will allow us to operate against the enemy, where the enemy is embedded underneath the civilian facilities and the civilian population, essentially Rafah and Khan Yunis. That is where they are, and that is where we will go after them. And we will find ways in order to keep civilians out of harm's way. Just as we did in northern Gaza. We took civilians, we adapted our pace of operations and the scope and the intensity and the weapons that we use to make sure that first and foremost civilians got out. Most of them have gotten out, and as we will continue operations, we will find solutions for that as well.
Now, one of the primary criticisms of the IDF in this operation has been the disproportionately high casualty numbers coming from Palestinian sources. Why is that number so high? And what is the IDF doing in order to protect Palestinian civilian lives and differentiate between civilians and combatants?
Yeah, so I think those numbers issued by the Hamas-controlled entities in Gaza are, simply put, false. They are exaggerated numbers of women, children, and the elderly. The biggest age group, the part of the demographic of Gaza that you see heavily underrepresented in the Palestinian figures, are men at the age of 17 to 35, which is combat age of men. They're not there. And it doesn't compute with the general population of Gaza. Men are at least 49 or 50% of the population, yet they are very little to be found in the list of casualties. That doesn't compute. And I think that what the Palestinians are trying to do, what Hamas is trying to do, is to inflate the amount of civilians killed and deflate and hide the amount of combatants killed. Not the first time that Hamas tried to do this. What we are busy doing is fact-checking and referencing dead terrorists that we are aware of, and then comparing that to the list of names and numbers that Hamas has given out, finding the discrepancies, and then we will be showing that to the world, and again exposing another lie of how Hamas manipulates information, how they lie and try to deceive. The sad thing is that so many organizations and even decision makers around the world take these numbers at face value as if they are true, without putting them into proper context of these are numbers and figures that have been disseminated by a terror organization. These are people that lie, deceit, and kill and murder for a living, and they don't have any issues about it. So why trust the data that they give? And I think it's very sad that UN institutions, international governments around the world are taking it at face value. That needs to change, and there needs to be a lot of skepticism regarding anything that is handed out by Hamas in Gaza.
Let's speak about the potential truce that's taking place. Does this truce, this ceasefire, endanger the IDF's ability to destroy Hamas in the Gaza Strip?
At the end of the day, I think it's clear for everybody, from Washington through the capitals of Europe, and it's definitely clear in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem, that this war cannot end with Hamas standing, with Hamas having combat capabilities and the ability to launch another attack like October the 7th. Ghazi Hamed, a senior Hamas official, said that we will do October 7 again and again and again and again. And I think that we should listen, and I think that Israeli decision makers are aware and need to be very careful and understanding of the fact that if we leave them the chance and the actual tools on the ground to rebuild, rearm, and plan another attack against Israel, that is what they'll do. And therefore, I think that we have no other choice but to, of course, facilitate the safe repatriation of these Israeli hostages, have them return home to their loved ones, which will be great and a moment of joy for those families, but then continue fighting until we dismantle Hamas. They don't. There's no contradiction between the two. There can be a local tactical pause of operations and then resume operations with great force and severity against Hamas.
Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Emily.
The Israeli government accuses Iran for orchestrating the hijacking of a cargo ship in the Red Sea, denying the vessel's Israeli affiliation. Houthi rebels backed by Tehran claim responsibility for the incident and say this is in response to Israeli aggression against Hamas in Gaza. And ILTV's William Sharon has more.
The Houthi rebels claim responsibility for the hijacking of a cargo ship in the Red Sea. The Israeli government accuses Iran of orchestrating the incident, while denying that the vessel in question is Israeli. The rebels, backed by Tehran, asserted in a statement that they conducted a military operation resulting in the seizure of an Israeli ship, which they claim to be taken to the Yemeni coast. Houthi spokesman Yahya Sari emphasized their actions were in response to what they deemed as Israel's brutal aggression against Hamas in Gaza. Two U.S. defense officials anonymously confirmed the hijacking of the vehicle carrier named the Galaxy Leader as the rebels rappelled down from a helicopter to seize control. Contrary to the Houthi claims, the IDF insisted that the vessel was not Israeli, but was instead registered under a British company, partially owned by Israeli tycoon Avram Unger. At the time of the incident, the ship was leased to a Japanese company and had an international civilian crew on board, with 25 crew members from Ukraine, Bulgaria, the Philippines, and Mexico, but no Israelis. This incident adds to the escalating tensions in the region, with Houthi rebels previously vowing to target ships associated with Israel. The rebels have in past weeks launched ballistic missiles and drones towards Eilat as part of what they term as axis of resistance against Israel. The situation unfolds against the backdrop of the ongoing conflict in Yemen, where the Houthis have been engaged in an ongoing struggle against a Saudi-led coalition since 2015.
And now, with Iran being an essential part behind the current war, backing Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, we're now joined by Yoni Ben Menachem, journalist and senior research fellow at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, who tweeted about Hezbollah's intentions to escalate tensions on the northern border as soon as the IDF enters southern Gaza. Yoni, the Houthis are now not only firing rockets towards Eilat, but also seizing partially owned Israeli ships in the Red Sea. Does Israel have any military solution here?
I think that this is a very big problem for Israel, and every Israeli response will have to be coordinated with the United States because the Houthis are a big challenge for Israel. They are far away from Israel, more than 2,000 kilometers, but they are trying to put pressure on Israel. Of course, this is by the orders of Iran. In order to force Israel to stop the war in Gaza and actually save Hamas from destruction. And after they failed in launching drones and missiles towards Israel, all of these drones and missiles were intercepted by Israel or by the Americans. Now they're trying a new method, which is threatening the Israeli ships who sail in the Red Sea. And they took over one ship, the Galaxy Leader, which is not Israeli. It's only a partial ownership of an Israeli businessman, and there were no Israelis aboard the ship, but they're still claiming that it's an Israeli ship. And this is a very worrying sign because they threaten to paralyze all the Israeli ships that sail in the Red Sea and actually put a blockade on Israel, preventing Israeli ships from importing and exporting through the Red Sea. This is very dangerous.
That's very dangerous and very worrying. Yoni, I want to go back to my lead where I said about your tweet that Hezbollah wants to escalate tensions if the IDF will enter the south. By now, of course, we don't know the plans and we're not going to reveal them here, but we know that the IDF is planning to go into the south. So what do we know about Hezbollah wanting to do there? Of course, backed by Iran.
Actually, what I tweeted in my Twitter account was an estimation that is heard in the Gaza Strip by Palestinians who are associated with Hamas. And they estimate, maybe it's a wishful thinking, we don't know, but they estimate that if the IDF will go to a big military incursion in Khan Yunis area and Rafah area, which are in the south of Gaza Strip, then the Hezbollah in the north of the border with Israel, they will escalate and make a greater escalation and attack Israel with more missiles and drones into the death of Israel. This is also very dangerous. We have to wait and see. Israel will have to make it very clear and warn Hezbollah that if they do that, then they should expect a strong reaction from Israel.
Of course, we know, of course, there are thousands of soldiers there on the northern border. Yoni, what is the relationship between Iran and the Houthis? Are the Iranians calling the shots and prompting their attacks all the way from Yemen?
Yes, of course, the Iranians are orchestrating the whole war in Israel. This is a war of attrition that started 3 weeks ago from all the proxies of Iran all over the Middle East. It's coordinated by Iran, and they are responsible for all the escalation that happened.
Yes, and Iran is encouraging or discouraging, forcing or not forcing Hezbollah to confront Israel on the northern front while not fully crossing the line into war. I mean, Iran sort of like, directing all the others, but staying in its spot. Khamenei, not sure he wants something else.
Right. This is the art of working behind the scenes of the Iranians without fingerprints. They are not. You cannot prove that they are in charge of what is happening. There is no smoking gun. They are working under the radar, the intelligence radar of Israel and the Americans, and they are planning this thing for a long time. This is actually the strategy of General Qasem Soleimani, who was assassinated by the Americans, and he's the one who had this vision and created all these connections with the Iranian proxies in the Middle East, and now Iran is implementing his strategy.
Yes, now moreover about that, the word of mouth of Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei have been tough on the one hand, but he only calls for temporary boycotts of Israel by Abraham Accords, Arab nations, but not really signaling military confrontation. Has he been intimidated by the U.S. aircraft carriers or everything that happens in the region? What's happening there?
Yeah, apparently the Iranians understand now that they cannot defeat Israel. They didn't expect the quick unity of the Israeli people to confront Hamas attack. They didn't anticipate the strength of the army that will retaliate in such a successful way in Gaza Strip. They thought that Israel is going to fall apart because of the problems that were in Israel because of judicial reforms. But now Israel surprised them. Their estimation now is that Israel is not going to surrender and Israel is not going to collapse. So now they're trying to cut the losses, and they are, of course, escalating in a very measured way because they know that the plan already failed.
Yes, Yoni, let's hope it keeps failing. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at ILTV.tv or download the ILTV Plus app. That's it for ILTV's weekly review. Stay safe and see you next week.